you and I both live on Jara country, in Jara country, at different parts of it. And it's deep winter here at the moment, even though the sun is coming through our glass house at the moment, and our north-facing windows. But what's alive to you right now in this season and in this time?
So I live on top of a hill, similar to you on the edge of town, and we're the last house before 175 hectares of bushland reserve. And it's so amazing living next to that and coming out and choosing to go left into town where the shops and the people are, or going right and generally not seeing any people, but seeing birds and lots of trees and heaps of kangaroos. And I love that I have that option. Um, and what's singing for me at the moment is I've been spending heaps of time in the bush with the boys. I've got three boys, 8 years old, 6 years old, and 3 years old. And we've been doing lots of play dates with other children in the bush where kids come over and we just go walking. There's heaps of like amazing cubbies that kids have built, and there's a golf course that has four dams that are really amazing to find yabbies in and frogs and just like the best playground ever for kids. And yesterday, two kids came over, a brother and sister, and we went out walking into the bush and um, I had an opportunity to say to them, would you like to walk off by yourself? So there was five of them and all different ages, with Florian was the youngest, he's three. And I'll meet you at this cubby because I knew that Apollo probably knew how to find his way. And they were all a little bit um, shocked that I was leaving them to their own devices. And I just planted the seed and said, well, I think that, you two will be able, the two big boys will be able to look after the younger ones, and um, I'll meet you around, and if you need me, just call at Kui and I'll come and find you. And it was so amazing, and I'm witnessing this more and more with kids, not just my kids, but so I gave them responsibility and I watched them walk off into the bush, and they quickly established that the two oldest boys would go at the front and the back with the little ones in the middle, and they took their role so seriously. They made sure that they were looking after them without making a fuss. And as they walked through the bush, this huge mob of kangaroos just came thumping through right in front of them. And I just was kind of tearing up, like standing behind a tree, watching them and just feeling like, what could be kind of better than that? Like for this group of kids to have this sense of danger and risk and responsibility. And then by the time I met with them at this cubby, their chests were like so proud. And yeah, it was just so amazing just to watch these little people just go off in the bush by themselves and just feel like they're so competent, and um, just even the way that the kangaroos just came at that exact moment to kind of like almost show them like that they were here too, and they stopped them in their tracks, and there's just so much wonder, and I'm just like absolutely in awe of just watching these children in nature, my children and other children, and just how much they it supports them. And yeah, just feeling so grateful that we live next to that space with there's so many amazing birds out at the moment, and just it's just such an incredible landscape. Like you can literally stand between Lianganuk and Lalgambuk and feel these two mountains, and it's just there's so many, even though it's been so mined and the landscape in this part of Jara country is like quite full on the way that it was mined and kind of taken from. Just the trees that grow from that history that are flourishing and all the goodness that's coming is just so inspiring. Yeah, it's really lighting me up at the moment.
Beautiful. Thanks, Ruth.
All right.
I love hearing you talk about motherhood and your boys and what you're doing and learning together. I wanted to talk about motherhood, you as a mother and an artist and a homesteader, and how you feel those three roles are integrated for you.
Yeah. Well, I feel like they're all kind of the same thing to me. Um, and I'll explain why because I I realize like in the kind of city art world, it's more normal to keep things segregated between the roles. And the art, I feel like the capital A art world kind of keeps it that way because art galleries aren't exactly the easiest places to take small children, especially little crazy boys. And so I feel like yeah, it's that whole system of it is set up in a way that makes it really hard. And it's taken me many years to find a way to make it work.
Mm.
And um, they just to go back to your question, they're interwoven for me um, in that motherhood for me is really creative. I mean, I really like being pregnant. And I think one of the reasons is I really love creating
Mm.
life. And I really love just creating. Both my parents are artists. My grandmother is an artist who I have a really close relationship with. And so it feels very natural for me to be in that creative mode. And I always wanted to have children. My first boyfriend at 16, I pleaded with him, please, can we have a baby? And he said, no way. And so I just find motherhood just so creating, both the act of creating life and you have to be creative in planning out a day with small children because they are so creative and I feel like they're like the original artists because they just live to the beat of their own drum and they just express themselves without having filters and it's so inspiring. And so yeah, I actually feel like being with the kids is like my research. And then I come to my studio, which is 2 minutes and 37 seconds away on my electric bike. And luckily, my studio rent is really cheap. And we're very grateful to live where we live and not have to pay a really big mortgage. So, because of that, I can have this separate studio space. And even though I spend most of my days, I work 1 day a week at RMIT in the city teaching drawing in fine art degree. But I spend most of my days with my children, and then it doesn't, I'm really exhausted all the time, but it feeds my art making and inspires my art making. And even though I have less time in the studio than maybe someone who doesn't have children or someone whose children go to daycare and school, I have this just such a rich inspiration from being a part of my children's life. And it's not always happy and good times either. Some days are really hard and they're all having meltdowns or they're processing really big feelings. And so art to me is like all most parents have something that allows them to process being a parent. And art is that big place for me of coming here and offloading and processing all that space holding. So that's kind of like from motherhood to art, kind of they're like two puzzles that fit perfectly together. And then the last um, puzzle of homesteading, is like the missing puzzle piece that connects it all because where we live, we're very much at the beginning of our journey. We've only been at our quarter acre block for a year and a half, but we want to take responsibility for our food and how we live, and it's basically replacing school. So we're planting trees, we're at the moment we're hand digging up eucalyptus root trees, and so that we can plant lots of fruit trees. And we're planning to have, we used to have milking goats when we lived on a farm, and we want to get them again, and keeping rabbits. And um, these are all activities that our kids love to be involved in. Rabbits, being in dirt, planting things and watching them grow. I mean, just planting a seed is like what I think one of the most creative things that you could do ever. And watching that process, they all inform so much. And I feel like I wouldn't be able to be an artist if I wasn't planting the seeds. I wouldn't be able to plant the seeds if I wasn't um, feeling the seed of life grow within my body. And just, yeah, they just inspire me so much and fit like a glove.
And I hear what you're saying about um, having a mother and I mean being a mother and having your kids at home and you know feeding off their energy and that creativity and their spirit and their lack of filters and that kind of wildness. But I still want to ask the question of you would have so much more time in your studio um, to have your adult thoughts, to process what needs to be processing, to have more creative output if you sent your kids to daycare and to school. And I'm wondering if you're able to articulate or speak more about why you don't send your kids, why you're not um, sending them to another place for their education. Why are you keeping them at home, even though that's kind of adds to the madness of life with three sons at home?
Um, Thanks for asking that because I feel like it's a really important conversation that mothers, parents, just society needs to be having because I get asked all the time at the moment as I've started to speak more publicly about not schooling my children in the kind of art world and when I have exhibitions. And yeah, people are asking me all the time, like, how are you doing it? How do you have time? Like, who's doing the homeschooling? And we don't follow a curriculum. So we're, I don't really like to say unschool. I just feel like we're living our life, and um it depends on the day, it depends what's happening with the children, but um it's gonna sound a bit kind of crazy to say, but it's actually for us it's easier and I have more time now that the kids are not at school. And I realize that that sounds like it makes no sense because if they were at school, yeah, maybe I could be like working all the time. But, and there's lots of ways to answer this question, but a few things that I really wanted to say were first that my eldest was in school. He went to kinder and prep and half of class one in a local school. And although I could have been having like a break with him there, I was kind of holding my breath all day when he was away. And it just didn't suit our family. And the stress that he felt being away for that long, like in class one, they're away 5 days. It was just so full on, and it had a really big effect on the health of our family. And um, So when we took him out of school and started to see him find himself again and feel safe to express himself in ways that um all the different ways, the good and the bad and the ugly ways, and just help him and watch him and observe him, our things opened up for our family rather than closed down. And some of the things that happened were um, the kids started playing together better. We've got three kids, and so when they're not fighting and they're playing really well with each other, we can still get heaps of stuff done. And some days it's really hard and we get nothing done, but we also chose to have three kids, and we've got these three boys, and like at the moment we're doing a million different projects on our block, and it's going to take a long time because we have three kids that don't go to school, but that's worth it for us because we're really involved in our children's lives. And for me, I'm a very schooled person and was very like the good student, and my partner was as well, Tyson. And um, it's been really quite big for us, the stuff that's come up around schooling. Like I work at a university, and so that's been really hard for me. Um, because I really love to work really hard and like achieve goals. And so it's brought up a lot of stuff for me. The kids are just having the time of their life, and sometimes I'm just like, whoa, like having to sort through all this stuff around my school experience. But it's just been such a positive thing for our family um, in huge ways. Like one massive way at the moment is Apollo, my eldest, just talks to people of adults on the street. He feels comfortable and he talks to them like how he would a child. And I love that he feels comfortable to do that. When he was in school, he was really um, kind of angry at adults and like a bit frightened that they had this power to get him in trouble. Um, and that's been really amazing to witness. Um, and yeah, the way that we're kind of building our home life is like there's there's so much for them to learn from what we're doing. So many skills. Some of them we're learning as we're doing them ourselves. And so it's really amazing watching them watch us figure out how to do it, and then that they're a part of watching every tree get planted, every uh, thing get built, every garden bed get dug, and all the like they're a part of that whole process. And I feel like that was really important to us because if they're at school, it would feel like it was our project and
Mm,
they were living here.
mm,
But I want them to feel like this is their place and they have been involved in and get to watch those trees grow and remember that this time that we were all busy madly crying and fighting and singing and doing all this busy stuff. Um, I also thought, oh, it's Ursula Le Guin. She said, motherhood brings you closer to the bone.
mm,
And when I read that, it's really always stuck with me. And um, I feel like it's really hard sometimes having all the kids at home. We don't get heaps of support in terms of like babysitting or any of that. And sometimes it's like, when one of us is working, it's a lot to have to manage. Um, but it feels really, really right for our family to be doing it like this. Um, yeah. so much to say about this. Oh, wait, that's what I was gonna say. I knew there's one other thing. Because when I was thinking about this question, so I grew up above my dad's picture framing shop, and even though I went to school, when I came home from school, he was always there. And I didn't realize until I had children how special that was. That I lived in my dad. I got to be a part of my dad's work and witness him and just have free access to him when I was home. And he really welcomed that. We were allowed to just like talk and talk and talk at him as he just framed and framed and framed. And it was that and my mother being an artist, and she was a stay-at-home mum, and she was always felt making and sewing and doing things whilst being with us. And I have this really vivid memory of her feet just rolling because she would be felting and on the floor, and just her feet were always moving. And I didn't real, and also my grandmother on my maternal side, she had six children, and she's an artist, and she only became an artist when they kind of started to get older. And although it's a bit cynical, she said my greatest achievement in life is having six children and having a life after, because in that era, like you were a housewife and you stayed at home and you couldn't do a lot of other things. And even though it kind of feels quite full on thing for her to say, there's so many kind of um, inspirations in my family of how to be at home doing the things that you love, and just having my parents around. I think that was really big for me, and I didn't realize until I became a parent that that was good. It would have been even better if I didn't go to school, but
We can't all be as lucky as our boys and not go to school. Um, Yeah, great to hear about your family context and the role modeling of artist and homemaking and yeah, allowing the children to be part of one's art practice, or at least allowing them in to witness it. And I'm curious to know, like you had that support, from your family. Um, but when, you were very and still are embedded in the Melbourne art scene, and how was that when you told people, who were part of that establishment, from the Melbourne scene, that you were going off to have a baby? What was the reaction? Was there a common reaction, or how did people respond?
so some people were really good, but not many. And I was 26 and very much like an up and coming, younger artist. Um, and the negative response that I got was really scary to me as a 26-year-old. Kind of like, as a metaphor, a big door was closing and there was no door handle, like being shut in my face, like it's over, like a breakup almost. And that was so confusing to me, because feeling the first kind of murmurs of pregnancy in my body and starting to change. And as I mentioned before, I really love being pregnant. I I feel like I was embodying new beginnings, and it was so exciting. And yet at the same time, I had this feeling of something ending or being forced to end, or that um, almost like a bit of messaging that it was bad that I was choosing to have the child at that time in my career. In the art world, a lot of women choose to have babies much later so that they can kind of focus on their career. Um, and I felt like I did the opposite. Um, but I also wanted to say just on that there was some of my favorite artists, women artists, were mothers, and I had no idea. And so like Louise Bourgeois, for example, my favorite, one of my favorite artists, had three sons. And I had no idea. And I looked at her work for years and years and studied it. And maybe I'd read it and it wasn't relevant because I wasn't a mom. But that to me was such a big thing that so many of these incredible woman artists were mothers and of certain eras, like in the 50s and 40s, for example, where they had a really, really hard time doing both. And when I became a mother, I was like, why didn't why don't they include that in the art history syllabus, like about their um, the fact that they were parents, because surely that enriches their artwork. Surely that gives you these incredible insights into the work, and especially what artists that I love that are making like kind of really psychological work or work about their identity. And so I was so shocked and I became like so obsessed with finding all the artist mothers and reading everything about what they thought about being an artist and a mother, and it was so inspiring.
Mm.
And then yeah, I'm still kind of hunting that information down. And recently I was reading about um a recent study that women, and I mean they should really teach you this in art school, but now I have the chance to pass on all this information, which has been such a gift actually working at the university, because I feel like I don't fit the mold. I live in the country, I'm homeschooling my children and really obsessed with growing our own food. And I almost feel like why are they still letting me letting me come? But I get to talk to all these young people and tell them about things that maybe just don't exist in the art school context, like what it feels like to give birth to your child in a kitchen, and what it feels like to have three sons that don't go to school, and um, what mushrooms are coming up where I live. And they love it. They love this all this information. Some of the my students, it's really been like really life changing to be exposed to some of these things.
Mm.
And um, oh, what was my train of thought? Oh, yeah, the study. Sorry, the study was about that in France and Spain, the archaeologists discovered a lot of the cave paintings from this region were probably done by women, or majority of them were done by women. And historically, they'd always been seen as like men did the cave paintings. They were out catching and hunting the uh, bison or whatever, and then coming and recording the stories on the caves. And when this archaeologist realized, or did from this study, because that they're actually like hand stencils, and he measured the hands and the bones and figured out through this study that the smaller hands were actually women. And when I hear things like that and read about things like that of ancient times where women had really important roles as mothers and artists recording their lives, I feel like um, we're really being not told what the real truth of artist mothers. And in fact, there's probably thousands of artists mothers that their stories just don't exist because they weren't recorded, or they had to write their artist name as a male pseudonym. But the world is hungry for stories of mothers' experiences, because at the moment that's all I'm making art about. And I just have so many mothers contacting me, and fathers and non-parents, just resonating with this universal experience of life.
Mm.
Yeah. But can I just say one more thing on that?
Yeah, of course.
Um, in the art world, it's really popular to have shows about motherhood and care at the moment. And so I feel like that didn't exist when I became a mother. There was none of that. And now I'm seeing it a lot. And I'm being asked to be in some of those shows. And although I think it's really good to have awareness of that, it's kind of like I feel like you need to be a bit careful around it because in the art world, it's kind of like, but the art market in comparison to like the supermarket has a certain product that's being sold that's really like popular and everyone wants to buy it. And in the art market, there's certain ideas that are really popular and everyone wants to make shows about it and buy the artwork about that.
Yeah, so wanting to know, you want to say a little bit more sort of about the what you feel are the main issues with industrial Western art practice and the art scene.
Yeah.
Because I know just from how you live that you and your partner Tyson have, yeah, you've shaped your life around and moving away from the issues that you see with industrial food, medicine, and education. But what do you see as the main issues or the main problems with industrial art?
Some of the big things I think or the big issues around that are techno-feudalism
Mm.
and I'm not represented commercially by a gallery, and so I sell a lot of my work through my Instagram page, but I'm censored on that page. And how can you be an artist
Mm.
and be
And
censored?
are you censored because you depict images of breastfeeding?
Yeah, nipples,
Okay.
for example, are censored, which is just offensive to someone who's breastfed for 8 years. Politically, religiously, censorship is one of the biggest issues in society. And because of the way that artists, young people, people that have businesses use social media to increase the value of their work and to reach as many people as they can, um, it's really effective, but at what cost? And for me, it's very troubling that Instagram is the main source of sharing these images that you make. And yeah, I'd really like to work towards getting off it and kind of breaking up with it because there has to be another way. And it's very troubling as well because when I was an art student, the art students were the ones that were rejecting the mainstream and questioning everything and wanting to dismantle the structures of power that were exploiting people and going to protests and talking about everything. And I've noticed working in an art school that that is becoming less and less.
Mm.
And that's because the university structure itself also mirrors that censorship. All these big businesses are, are connected to that censoring of what's allowed to be spoken about and what's not. And I feel like one of art's roles is to have that freedom of expression and that it can't really be effective if it's being limited in that way. So that's a really big one. Um, and then what I was saying before about trends and how I think a lot of younger artists are kind of have this pressure from institutions um, to become really successful really young. And it's really I don't think it's a very healthy way of approaching being an artist because I think that life of an artist is long, and that when you look at artists in their 80s or something that have devoted their whole life to practicing, and you look at their work and the depth of the excavation of their subject matter that they've looked into over their lifetime is so special. And this kind of fast-paced thing of young people going to art school and graduating and becoming big artists that have big shows that make lots of big money is is actually harmful because it proliferates really. One thing is not good mental health. And I feel like that's really tuned in also to the art world of um, almost being a little bit put on a pedestal for being mentally unwell. It's a hard job. Lots of artists don't make really a lot of money and they find it hard to live. And they might be making work about some really full-on experiences in their life without much support or understanding. And, being in a white cube gallery space is not exactly like having sitting in circle in the forest
Yeah.
and being witnessed.
Yeah.
You kind of witnessed through the eyes of a voyeur. The viewer is looking at your work and judging your work. And it's not so cool to talk about feelings.
Mm.
And for me, that's so troubling for young people
Mm.
because some of my students, they're just the most wonderful, sensitive people. And I really wish that in the art world there was more discussions around how it's more important to be well and to look after yourself and live life in a way that feels right to you, and you can keep making work even if you do that. Like, and a good example is Leonard Cohen, because he was really idolized for his music that was really dark and depressing that he made when he was young, and then he kind of sorted his life out and found joy and uh, a spirituality, and then he still wrote music, and it's just as good as the music that he made when he was in despair. And I think that's so important for young people to know that taking care of themselves and living their life not just for the art world and not just for the audience that exists within that art world is is a much better way of looking at like life as an artist. And yeah, also I would have to say that in the art world it's like very much a breeding ground for the individual
Mm.
and the I as separate to the community. And even though there are these kind of communal spaces or groups that exist within it, it's very competitive. And getting grants, for example, is really competitive. And in my experience, um, it's a hard slog when you're doing that all on your own and just thinking about yourself too. And I think it's kind of built that way on purpose. And that's it's not sustainable to live like that
Mm.
and to make art in that way. For me, teaching is a way for me to connect and share, and I get as much out of teaching than my students get out of it because it's just so incredible to share ideas and to discuss. And we're not making money by doing that and having these friendships that last outside of the institutions, but so much goodness comes from that, and so much um, insights and trust and a passing down of knowledge and experiences. And yeah, definitely needs to be more of that,
Mm.
but not sure if that could ever exist within this Western industrial art world.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
you meant, thanks, Ruth. And you mentioned before our circle,
Mhm.
just what sitting in circle sort of, well, about sitting in circle. And you and I have been part of a women's circle for crying out loud. Uh, in November, it will be 7 years. Um,
Ah.
I know, I just saw that the other day. It's like, wow, that's such a long time. And just, yeah, how I know for me how important that is to have that time once a month with women in the forest around a fire. But I wanted to ask you about it, yeah, just about the importance of it in your life and why you keep showing up each month in the forest.
Well, as you know, I really love to cry. And so I love showing up to have a space to cry in. And that is so important to me. And I feel so lucky to have that as a part as a part of my life. And I actually don't know where I would be without that circle. And I want to cry just thinking about it. It's taught me so much about women, and it's really healed my sister wound. Before the circle, I really see myself having a really different relationship towards women and trusting women and feeling safe around women. This kind of tunes back to school and the school experience of female hierarchies within girls' schools. I went to a Catholic girls' school and it was pretty full on being a teenager in that environment and the meanness and um, the bullying and the lack of self-confidence that was coming out of all of that and all these young women. And it wasn't until I started the circle that I started to identify, wow, I've got a lot of issues around this. And so sitting in circle and witnessing women share their grief and their joy was just so life affirming to me and allowed me to have so much more compassion for women, and that had a ripple effect on me as a mother. One of the biggest things about the circle is that you don't fix or try and give advice. And as a mother, that's just been the biggest and best
Mm.
thing ever that I could do with my boys is I don't know sometimes why they need to cry and why they're so angry. I don't try and change it. And sometimes I don't say anything. I just sit there and wait until they've expressed it. And yeah, that feels really connected to going to the circle. I learned that at the circle through the protocols of the circle, and that has helped me so much, even being a better partner to Tyson and then teaching and being a good listener. And I don't think I was good at any of those things before I went to the circle. Like, really, it's just had such a life-changing effect uh, in so many ways, with my parents. But yeah, as a mum, it's been so big I remember that one of the first times that I practiced that when I was like new to the circle, and um, one of the children, I can't remember which one, was really upset, and I I just let the whole feeling just come out of them and not say anything or do anything, just got comfortable. And then after they had expressed, they just hugged me and said how much they loved me. And it was such a like moment of, oh, this is really important to really learn this skill in life, or I really want to become really good at this. Um, but also I get to say to my art students in the city that I sit in a circle in the forest with women around a fire. And like I'm normalizing crying in the forest with women as it should be really normal. And I love that I get to bring those things to the city and into the institution as if I was just going to a party on Friday night. And also, my partner Tyson goes to the men's circle, and likewise, by both of us going, we're we're role playing something that is really important for our boys to be aware of. And sometimes they really don't want me to go to the circle. And I say, but I have to go. I have to sit with the women and cry. And I feel like just even them hearing that is so important. And the men's circle that joins, that they also sing in the fire choir, as you know. And for three little boys to go to community events and look up at their father standing with a bunch of old men, dads, young men, all different kinds of men in all different walks of life, holding each other and singing songs that they wrote together is just the best thing ever.
So, what are some other things, as a mother of three boys, what's important today, this juncture of history, what's important in raising sons?
This is also could be like a whole podcast. And I'm so happy to see more and more conversations about mothering boys at the moment. And I know there's like books written about it, but more and more books seems to be coming out about it for parents, and I'm so happy about that because as a proud boy mother, I feel like it's a really important one. Um, so it took me years to be okay with being a boy mother. I just have one sister, and my mother never yelled, and we were very much good little girls. So when I had sons, and they started just roaring into life and tearing through the street and the shops and letting their voices be heard and physically showing me their strength, it was so full on for me. And it brought up a lot of issues that I had in myself around um, the father wound. And I had to really do some deep work with my relationship with this wound that I had, and so did my partner, to understand what was needed of me to raise three boys. And I actually, there was like a turning point for me. I was at a kid's birthday party, and so I had all three of them. Florian was a little baby, and this little boy was having the best time of his life, just like wrestling and running around this backyard with all these little boys. And he just ran up to me and yelled, "Boys are the best!" And I said, "Yeah." And then I was like, wow, really taken it on now, like because the old me with the kind of father wound and these uh who would talk about the patriarchy all the time, coming from that wounded place, was um threatened by that boy saying boys are the best, and my femininity was threatened. But it's completely flipped for me because well, it's a huge responsibility to raise three boys who are going to become three men.
Mm.
And I don't take that lightly. And that really has been a huge part of taking my boys out of school because I think more and more there's less spaces that boys can feel safe in. And that this is a really big problem that we have in society where, and I think mothers of sons need to be really careful about putting their boys in places that send them messaging that there's something wrong with them for being a boy. And school was a bit like that for my eldest. It wasn't until he was at school that he started to hate girls because the girls were so good at sitting still,
Mm.
he told me. And the boys, just everything we do is bad. And it's true. But if you take those same boys and put them in the bush near our house, they become the heroes and they become the kindest, most intelligent, the leaders. And I yeah, I guess I didn't expect that when I had sons, that how big that is. And it's still really hard, getting some looks, sometimes because the boys are being too loud and people in public, want children still to be seen and not heard. And I still feel that a lot. But I'm I mean, we wanted these children, we wanted to have these children, and we don't want them to be away with someone else telling them what it takes to be a man. For us, we we really like them and we really like spending time with them and we really want to be around them all the time and involved in raising the men that our world desperately needs: generous, kind, sensitive, and strong men. And I'm just in love with that. I get to be a part of raising those men. And it's really hard to do that because it's big carrying that responsibility. But when I see glimmers of it kind of working with the boys becoming those, having those qualities that I think society needs, I think we're doing the right thing. Yeah, and I also wanted to share when Apollo, my eldest, was um 5 years old and our youngest was born, we were down the street one day and another person had said, "Oh, you had another boy." Oh, and some negative comment, which happened to me all the time. Not so much anymore, but when I had a newborn, of, is it a boy or a girl? Oh, another boy. Oh, I bet you were hoping for a girl. And that's a really big thing, having three boys. And Apollo was 5 years old and he looked up at me and said, "Mummy, why does everyone think it's bad that I'm a boy?" And I realize, whoa, the messaging starts really young to boys that they're too much
Mm.
and that there's something wrong with them. They've got too much energy or they need this or they need that to calm them down. And yeah, they do have a lot of energy, and we have to spend a lot of time outside, and we do a lot of digging, and we climb a lot of trees and shoot a lot of bows and arrows. But that energy it gives me energy. Yes, I'm tired, but I'm so inspired by it because it's so life affirming, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Yeah.
Oh, let's end there. That's so beautiful.
Oh, it's so good talking to you. It's such a treat on a Saturday.
Bye. Thanks so much, Ruth. Bye.